Hello and welcome to Hops and Bros. This week
On Craft Beer 101, we'll be talking about probably the coolest thing in craft beer right now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that was lame.
I know. Coolships. We're talking about Coolships this week.
For an open window on the craft beer world, Max and Chris from Hops and Brew. Welcome to Hops and Bros. Yeah.
Alright, so this week we're going to be talking about Coolships. Now the cool thing about Coolships is, Chris...
It's old. It's very old. So, taking back to medieval times. So we're not talking about... Yeah.
Before we continue, there's one thing I think we should mention. We're not going to be talking about Lambics. We've
Okay.
been warned in our first year of Hops and Bros when we started doing the Craft Beer 101 that we shouldn't be talking about Lambics because people get very nitpicky about their Lambics. We're going to
Yeah,
talk
but
about Coolships, and then Lambics is going to be for another time.
Yeah, no worries. We're gathering all the necessary information to create a proper Gers or Lambic Craft Beer 101 on those subjects. And no worries, we'll get proper experts to talk about it so we don't put our feet in our mouth like we usually do because we've been warned.
We definitely will regardless,
Yeah.
but we'll do everything to mitigate that.
Exactly.
Anyways,
So, Coolships,
where are they from?
They're from the medieval times. So back then, no refrigeration existed that much. It wasn't something that technology was given for brewers out there. So when they did the whole brewing process, they did their mash, their boil and everything, cooling the wort for the fermentation was made out there in the open. So usually you use some vessels, something that's available, easily accessible for you, brewer in medieval times, to cool off your wort. So most of the brewers had access to old tree trunks, which was reminiscent of boats, which now you mix up the cool and ships together and you have a new word, which is Coolships, which is a high capacity vessel to cool off your wort, aerate, but also access to spontaneous fermentation, microbial infection from the environment around it. So
the spontaneous fermentation is kind of a byproduct of cooling of the wort. Now, as we know, back then, no refrigeration, so you had to find a way to cool it, and the best way really was to get a big metal vat, have it kind of shallow so that you would have the maximum air contact with your wort, and it would slowly overnight cool the wort. Now, we know today that that's probably one of the worst things you can do unless you actually want your beer to go bad on purpose. Because the more contact to oxygen, the more contact to microorganisms, to mycoflora around you, the more risk of infection you have. So yeah, Coolships were used, especially in Belgium. It was one of the biggest things. That's the reason why they're renowned for lambics and gueurs and all those sour styles. Now, not only that, they're not only renowned, but for a while, the secrets of how they would make those beers was hidden. Not until a couple years ago did they start talking openly about those styles, in fear that they would go away as soon as all those breweries would start dying off, which I thought was really interesting. And goosebumps, because I mean, in the beer industry, you rarely have someone openly give their secrets away just for the love of beer. Although I guess you do see it a lot more than you would expect.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So let's talk about Coolships. Overnight, cools down. As a byproduct, you get infections. A lot of them too. Over 200 microorganisms can infect your beer while it's cooling off. Now, what's cool about that is that some microorganisms, and even the fact that you put hops in beer is actually going to protect it to some extent. It's gonna make sure that some lactobacillus bacterias are not going to develop. Some types. Other types are going to do it freely. That's for sure. But anyways, so your wild yeast is going to purposely infect the beer, and at that point you're going to get spontaneous fermentation. Now, the location of which your Coolship is placed is also very important. It's got to be surrounded by wood. That's how you get your house culture, and that's how you get a bunch of microorganisms that are going to just burrow in those pores and then infect when the heat of the wort hits that room. It's going to steam the room.
Yeah, but I've seen Bellwoods having their Coolship in a container just outside of their brewery, in, I think in Ossington or the other one outside, which is really still downtown Toronto. No woods.
Well, yeah, well, I believe it's in a container because they move it from location to location.
Okay.
Because that's the other thing is you want wild yeast around you, and in the heart of a city you do have some, but not as much as you would say in a vineyard or close to fruit trees or just close to a river even. That's where the original lambics are from, around Brussels. So a lot of wood, a lot of porous wood to be able to get your house culture. Not only that, but usually they'd be put on the second story of your brewery and only used in the cooler months. So in the summer, you can't do it. There's too many bad bacteria out there to cool your beer. So you had to do it in the fall and spring. But that's the other thing is it gets too warm in the summer to really cool down. That's, I guess, one thing that you can recall from this. It's that everything happened by accident back then. They didn't have scientists looking at these numbers and figuring out that, there's microorganisms doing this, doing that. It was just, it's cooler in these months, so we're going to cool it at this time, compared to cooling in the summertime where it's warm and you're not going to do it. And then tradition kind of kicks in where they do the same thing over and over again, and they develop a style of beer in this case.
Exactly. And all the Coolships are really dependent of the microflora, like you said, around them. So some breweries out there in Belgium, when they needed to move the brewery to a bigger facility, or just because the building wasn't safe anymore for hosting a brewery, they had to remove all the dirt and crap around to reinfect the new building with the same microflora, so they won't lose that nice bacterial flora that can infect those Coolships when brewing those gers or lambics. Same thing if you speak about like American, I think we should call them American lambics or gers, or just invent our own word for those style of beers. But spontaneous fermentation American beers, it's also that, like, it's really dependent of the forest around you. You spoke about trees or vineyards, then microflora will really have a big effect on your Coolships. Pit Caribou out there in Gaspésie was one of the first spontaneous fermentation breweries, I think last year. We already talked a little bit about it. Don't quote me on that, I'm not sure, because they gave out about like a bunch of permits in Quebec to do spontaneous fermentation because it wasn't really allowed at first.
Yeah, not only not allowed, but people didn't know how to do it. I mean, you know that there's a concept of having a big vat that you cool your beer in, but A, you've been told all your life not to do that, and B, you don't know that you need to have the wood around. You need to have all those porous materials to be able to cultivate your house culture. You need to not only do it this way, but also add it to barrels. Now, we were just talking about Coolships, but now we're talking about more of the lambic styles or the sour styles, which I didn't really want to get into, but that's kind of, it goes together. That's what Coolships are used for now, because Coolships to cool your beer are kind of not I don't want to say productive. They're not, what's the word I'm looking for?
It's not like, if you go business wise.
What's the word I'm looking for?
It's time consuming. It takes a lot of time to make an end product with it.
Yeah, it's not efficient. Efficient was the word I'm looking for. It's not an efficient way to cool your beer, so why would you use it? Well, you use it because you get those spontaneous fermentation. If you didn't have that, don't use a Coolship. It's not the way to go. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up Coolships. I don't know. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. It's like, seriously, you guys, after watching the video, go check a few breweries' pictures when they use Coolships. It's quite impressive, the way they use it and how big it is. And sometimes they can take like a nice picture of like a mirror beer. It makes kind of like a calm lake, but of beer. Sitting there, it's beautiful.
It really is beautiful, and I urge you guys to not only look at the pictures, but if you know of a brewery close to you that has a Coolship, ask to see if you can come by when they're using it. Because it's going to be spectacular. It's going to be something weird, something different, and something new in North America.
Exactly.
those beers that are going to be produced are not going to be like the ones that are produced in Europe. They're going to be its own thing.
Exactly, yeah. It will never be the same because the microflora is completely different.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think it sums up pretty much how a Coolship is. If you guys have questions or want to add more to the Coolship conversation, put a comment down below. This is how it works. And Max?
And while you're at it, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next episode of Hops and Bros.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be kick-ass.
It always is, Chris.
I know. You make them perfect.
I do my best.
You're the best. You're the best.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.